PFT PM is back. Yes, during the PFT Live hiatus, which this year will last 6 weeks. PFT Live back, 7 a.m. Eastern on July 28th. Most weekdays, I will be sitting right here in my primary alternate location, the Olive Garden restaurant that happens to be in my house, where it's very close to a router, so the Wi-Fi is excellent. Few glitches if possible. I've just jinxed us. PFT PM, most weekdays. I'm sorry I missed Monday. That was my annual physical in Pittsburgh. Tuesday, I had to go back to Pittsburgh for another medical issue, which is no big deal, but it's an annoyance, and I'm on the path toward getting it fixed. It's some residual dizziness from the horrible bout of vertigo I had last August. I'm going to have vestibular rehabilitation. I had no idea what that was until yesterday. That should get me back to 100% or as close to it as I'm ever going to be. All right, let's get to it. We'll have some topics and then we'll answer some questions. Lamar Jackson met with reporters yesterday. He missed most of the Ravens offseason program, giving up $750,000 in a workout bonus to match the $750,000 he gave up last year. That's $1.5 million gone forever because in the contract he negotiated, he agreed to workout bonuses that he did not earn. His prerogative, and it really pales in comparison to the total contract value, $52 million per year, not just new money, but also from signing. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But there's been some conversation, been some acknowledgement by GM Eric DaCosta that a contract extension is possible for Lamar Jackson. As usual, he declined to talk about his contract. He never does, and that's fine. That's his business. But if we're going to predict how things will play out going forward, history becomes very relevant to this. It's entirely possible Lamar Jackson will have a different approach this time around, but what did we see the first time? He wanted what he wanted. He didn't relent. It went through the full 5 years of his rookie contract before he was franchise tagged. And then at a time when the Ravens may have been thinking they were going to have to trade him, they finally got a deal done. With 3 years left on his 5-year deal, is it possible for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson to have the conversations necessary to get a deal done? Or will Lamar take the same approach he took last time? This is what I want, and until you're ready to give it to me, there's nothing to talk about. And it really doesn't become something that is at full boil until the current contract expires. So that's what makes this different from the normal contract extension for a highly paid player. Agents will mobilize when the time comes. The team has to mobilize too. In this case, if Lamar Jackson just decides, I want what I want, and I've got no reason to do anything until you're ready to give it to me, we could be dealing with this for the next 3 years. We'll see how that plays out. But remember this, and this is what I mentioned earlier. The contract he signed has a new money value and a total value at signing of $52.5 million because he wasn't under contract when he did his current deal. When you go apples to apples, he's really number 3 right now, behind Josh Allen at $55 million a year and Dak Prescott at $53 million a year. So he's not far off from being the highest paid if we set aside the new money BS fiction. Now, the new money BS fiction will become relevant if he does a deal with time left on his current contract, and he could be the highest paid quarterback from a new money average standpoint, yada, yada. But he still has a deal. I've seen some articles that, this is such a great deal for the Ravens. He's the number 10 highest paid quarterback right now. Yeah, if we focus on new money average. If we look at total value from signing, Lamar Jackson's deal is still in the top 5. Should he be number 1? It's all a matter of timing. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, they should all be in that conversation. And the thing to watch, and we report on this from time to time, cash flow over the 4-year window that is currently relevant. Last year, this year, the 2 years after it, this year, 3 years moving forward. Cash flow in a 4-year window, that's a key. And Lamar Jackson, if nothing else, needs to be among the leaders when it comes to, at any given time, his cash flow over a 4-year snapshot. So I don't know how much more we'll get by way of a snapshot of the contract talks. I don't know if they'll make any progress, but it is something that will continue to linger until there's another deal that keeps Lamar Jackson in place in Baltimore, which reminds me of the point that I made a couple of weeks ago, and some Ravens fans lost their minds about it. At some point, the Ravens will begin looking for a replacement. That's the way football goes. And they did it with Joe Flacco. At some point, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years from now, they will be looking for a replacement for Lamar Jackson. That becomes a factor in these contract talks at some point. Probably not now, definitely not now, but at some point, that's part of the equation because every player ultimately is going to be replaced by every team at some point in time. The Dolphins will be replacing Jalen Ramsey with presumably draft picks if and when the trade is done. Somebody asked me earlier today, I was on the Score in Chicago, if and when a Ramsey trade will happen. And because the news first came out middle of April that the Dolphins were going to move on from Ramsey, even though they made him the highest paid player at his position, September of last year. 7 months later, it's a mutual parting of the ways. I thought a deal would be done right after June 1. That's when the cap hit can be spread over 2 years. It didn't happen. Here we are at June 18. It hasn't happened. I assume that something's going to happen right around the time training camp opens, but who knows? And it dawned on me when I was thinking about this. In 2021, Deshaun Watson sat out the entire season. And it wasn't because he wanted to. It wasn't because the Texans wanted him to. They were trying to trade him. And coincidentally, he was almost traded to the Dolphins. Right around Labor Day weekend, there was strong buzz that a deal was going to get done that would have sent Watson to Miami. It didn't happen. Close to the trade deadline, it kind of kicked up again. It didn't happen. The Texans ended up paying Deshaun Watson not to play at all in 2021. Could we have that happen with Jalen Ramsey and the Dolphins? It would be a 1 week at a time thing. But week 1, week 2, not traded, doesn't play, gets paid. Week 3, week 4, week 5, doesn't play, gets paid. No trade. Right up until the Tuesday after week 9. And then if it doesn't happen then, he gets paid more than $20 million on top of the $4 million he's already gotten from the Dolphins to not play. And what the Dolphins have to decide is how much of his contract are they willing to pay to get whatever they want for him. And the more the Dolphins pay of that $20 million, the more that they'll get. Now, if they end up de facto paying that money by keeping him into the season, that becomes a factor because the new team doesn't get full value for him this year. The best thing to do is reach a deal before training camp. The problem is if the Dolphins don't have multiple teams trying to get Ramsey, where's their leverage? Your best leverage, and I've said this time and again, but it bears repeating, as it relates to anything that you are trying to sell or trade, your best leverage is, I'm good, I'll keep it. Oh, you only want to pay me $50,000 for my car? I'll keep it. No, I'm fine. I'll keep it. I don't have to trade it to you. I'll keep it. The Dolphins don't have that option. And I don't know that they would have been able to finagle the sense that they're trying to keep or willing to keep Jalen Ramsey, but that ship has sailed. He said his goodbyes on social media. He wasn't there for mandatory minicamp. I'd be stunned if he's at training camp. I think they'll pay him to stay away. Now, maybe they'll let him come to training camp and have his own workout schedule and not really be around the team. Now, he has to be on board with that. If he wants to be there at practice, if he thinks that puts pressure on the Dolphins to make a trade, he could say, I want to be there for everything. I want to play. I will be here until you get rid of me, if he thinks that will expedite the process. But he's got the same agent as Deshaun Watson. We saw what happened in 21. The players stayed away. The team was fine with it, and they went through a whole season of Deshaun Watson being on the team but not getting paid. That could happen with Jalen Ramsey. Watch, he'll be traded today. That's probably how it goes. All I'm saying is this is what could happen. And the fact that we're 18 days into June, it has to be on our radar screen at this point that maybe the Dolphins won't be able to get the trade they want, and maybe they'll have to carry him into the regular season. And once that happens, who knows how long he'll be there in 2025. Who knows how long Trey Hendrickson will have to wait for the contract he's been trying to get, due to make $16 million this year. I was told several months ago the Bengals had offered $28 million per year in new money on a new contract. He presumably wants north of 35. That's a pretty big gap. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reported over the weekend that Hendrickson and the Bengals have resumed communications. Okay. They can talk. The question is, can they get it done? It's a deadline-driven business. The Bengals are stubborn. And at the end of the day, if Hendrickson holds out, the Bengals will not care. That's their best leverage. Now, it's erratic, it's unpredictable, and it puts money ahead of winning, but they won't care if he stays away. That's why I wrote several weeks ago he runs the risk of being this year's Hassan Reddick, sitting out, giving up money, losing millions, missing regular season games, eventually showing up with some sort of a face-saving adjustment, but at the end of the day, out a lot of money. That's what may happen to Hendrickson if he holds out. His best play, get their best number on the table and take it before the regular season starts or before training camp starts, ideally. That's going to be the question. If training camp opens and he's not there, they'll fine him, obviously. But if he's there and he holds in, last year, they fined Jamar Chase for holding in. Not every team is fine with a guy showing up, not working while he waits for his contract. The Bengals weren't okay with that last year. That hadn't gotten a lot of play as it was happening. They fined him. Now, whether or not they waived him remains to be seen. At one point, they took the position they couldn't. Well, they can. They could have because he was under his rookie contract. They can't waive Hendrickson's fines if he doesn't show up. He can show up and not participate and still be subject to fines that would likely be non-waivable. But that is part of this to keep an eye on as well. Maybe they get this done before training camp opens. That's the best. Get the guy ready. Get his deal done, get Shamar Stewart's deal done, and get your players ready to go week one. Didn't they learn last year the consequence of losing week one to a Patriots team that otherwise went 3-13? You give the Bengals that win, all other things equal, they're in the playoffs last year. They need to have their guys there and ready to go so they can pursue a playoff berth and try to get back to a Super Bowl and win it for the first time in franchise history. The Lions would like to get to a Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history, and they have become very adept at signing their key young players. And they usually do it now during draft week. Last year, receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown, after his third year, he got a new contract draft week. Penei Sewell, first-round tackle after his third year, new contract draft week. This year, safety Kirby Joseph, draft week after 3 years, new contract. Aidan Hutchinson, 3 years in, still waiting. And this is a strange situation because no one is talking about the fact that Hutchinson doesn't have a deal. We talk about TJ Watt. We talk about Micah Parsons. We talk about Trey Hendrickson. Pass rusher, pass rusher, pass rusher. Here's Hutchinson. He doesn't have a deal. No conversation about it. He had a 12 to 15-minute press conference at off-season workouts. Wasn't asked a single question about it. Part of the problem is he wants to be in Detroit. And the challenge for the Lions will be to not use that against him. We see that time and again. I've made that point at PFT. I made that point during an episode of PFT Live. I'm going to make that point again. The most loyal, dedicated, happy employees are the ones who are most likely to be taken advantage of because the boss is going to be more focused on keeping the unhappy people happy, the people who have options and who are willing to explore them in the fold. They'll pay them more than they'll pay the person who's happy. And at some point, the question becomes, will the person who's happy wake up one day and say, screw this. I've been too good to them for too long. They've taken advantage of me. I'm out. The problem for Hutchinson, he's got 2 years under his rookie contract left, and then they can do the franchise tag dance. So he's 3-4 years away from being able to leave, unless he would ask for a trade, but they could easily say no. And what's he going to do? Not play, not get paid, not play for his hometown team where he wants to be. We'll see how it works out. And I understand why the Lions would want to wait. They want to make sure he's healthy. But from his perspective, I've done everything I should do. I should no longer have to carry the risk of injury. I should be getting my reward because if he goes and plays this year, suffers another serious injury, then what happens? So he has every reason to believe he's earned it, and the Lions have every reason to be patient. And through it all, what have other teams learned? The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. But remember, for first-round picks, if you can find a way to kick the can through that fourth year, you save millions, because Hutchinson makes like $5.5 million this year, total cash flow. If he would get a new contract, he'd make a lot more than that this year. That money never comes back. That was one of the criticisms of the Lamar Jackson failure to get a deal done with the Ravens when they were ready to pay him. Josh Allen got his contract. He made big money during the years that Lamar Jackson was unable to get a deal done with the Ravens, unwilling to get a deal done with the Ravens. Under that rookie contract, it's a lot of savings for the team if you can get through year 4. Year 5, it's more expensive because of the option. Year 4, that is the best dollar-for-dollar value a team is going to get for a first-round draft pick who has turned out to be a great player. Cowboys got Micah Parsons for $3 million last year. The Bengals got Jamar Chase for about $4.5 million. The Vikings got Justin Jefferson a couple of years ago for under $4 million. Great value. You get a big year from a key player, and you defer paying. The Lions may be trying to pull that off, and if Hutchinson is willing to go along with it, that's his business, but he's taking a hell of a risk if he goes into the 2025 season without the contract he has earned. Last one, speaking of contracts, and some big changes are happening in Green Bay. Fans don't really get caught up in this, and I understand it. It's really the business side of the sport, but when you've got a team that doesn't have an owner, that is a corporation where the stock is basically a souvenir, but there's a board of directors, there's a CEO, there's no one individual person who runs everything. The CEO, the president of the team, is the closest to it. Mark Murphy, exiting next month. Ed Policy, who's been with the team for over a decade as general counsel, he becomes the new Packers president. And he said yesterday that with 2 years left on their contracts, GM Brian Gutekunst and coach Matt LeFleur won't be getting an extension before the current season. Policy also made it clear he doesn't like having GMs and coaches in lame duck years, the final years of their contracts. So after this year, it's going to be renew, extend, or bye-bye. And I don't have any reason to think the Packers would want to move on from Gutekunst to LeFleur. I mean, LeFleur is one of the more underrated coaches in the NFL. He arrived in 2019. He immediately got thrust into the dysfunction that existed between Aaron Rodgers and the front office. Rodgers launched a passive-aggressive media campaign to secure the ability to call more audibles at the line of scrimmage. LeFleur has been compliant. LeFleur has been effective. LeFleur has been a very effective mediator, especially during the early years when Rodgers was still there. And they just win, and they win, and they win. And yeah, they haven't been to a Super Bowl, but they continue to be highly competitive. I would be stunned if this is the last year in Green Bay for Matt LeFleur or Brian Gutekunst. But here's what you got to remember. Even though Policy was part of the brain trust that hired Gutekunst and LeFleur, he may have his own list of people. Every coach has a list of quarterbacks that coach would like to have on his team. Every GM walks around with a list of coaches, and every owner is going to have his or her thoughts on who should be running the football operation. We don't know what Ed Policy thinks. We don't know what Ed Policy wants. This is a new personality. This is a new dynamic. This is a new everything. We don't know anything about how he's going to run this team, but he's going to be running the team. He's the chairman of the executive committee as well. He's going to have a lot of sway. They hired him. They entrusted this to him. He is going to be making some big decisions. And the biggest one will be, after this season, keep or move on from the GM and the head coach. I'd be stunned. But we don't know anything about Policy. It's a blank slate. It's an open book. We'll find out as time goes by. All right, let's answer a few questions on this Wednesday edition of PFT PM as I buy time. Scrolling through the document that has the first question from our good friend who's been posing questions for a very long time, long enough for me to figure out that the handle is not a red zone out. It's a red zona UK. Is Mike Tomlin the perfect doorman for Aaron Rodgers to exit the NFL with a respectable 9-8 record? This is where the objectives of Tomlin and Rodgers deviate. For Rodgers, winning record and getting to the playoffs is good enough to wipe away the stink from 2023, 2024 with the New York Jets. I think that's a good way for him to walk off into the sunset. Just get to the playoffs. For the Steelers, for Mike Tomlin, I think this whole thing is a failure unless they win a playoff game. Anything after that is gravy. They need to win a playoff game because if they don't, well, all this stuff you did in the offseason, paying DK Metcalf all that money, waiting for weeks for Aaron Rodgers to come around, even though, by all appearances, they had a deal in place. They knew what they were going to do. The fans were left in the dark. The fans were left to think that the Steelers were engaging in conduct unbecoming the black and gold, unbecoming and unfit for the terrible towel, to be waiting and waiting and waiting for a guy the Jets cut. They win a playoff game, it's a victory. It's a positive. They fail to win a playoff game, you're going to have a lot of fans saying, so what? And look, those fans that are skeptical about Aaron Rodgers, once he starts throwing the ball around week 1 at the Jets, week 2 against the Seahawks, week 3 at the Patriots, they go 3-0. Fans will be feeling very differently about Aaron Rodgers, and it puts a ton of pressure on that first game. Oh, so much. What a game to start the season with. Can't wait. 1 o'clock Eastern, the first Sunday of the regular season. Steelers at the Jets. New look Jets, new attitude Jets, new culture Jets. Aaron Rodgers trying to prove that the Steelers were right and prove that the Jets were wrong. So much drama. As the NFL said after the schedule came out, Mike North, the guy who puts it all together now. If they had known Aaron Rodgers was going to Pittsburgh, that would not have been a 1 o'clock game. That is a juicy game with which to start the season. Next up, Dr. J, 144. I know these things are tough to predict, but do you have a gut feeling about where things are headed with these Antonio Brown charges? More likely he faces serious time or the charges are dropped. I don't know anything about the facts. I just know what's in the warrant as reported by initially, I believe, the Washington Post, and then others obtained the warrant. There's a pending warrant for the arrest of Antonio Brown for attempted murder with a firearm, serious felony in Florida, serious felony anywhere. You can tell that Antonio Brown's position is going to be akin to stand your ground, self-defense. I was attacked. I was robbed. How am I the guy that's in trouble for this? But the thing to remember, if this went down the way the warrant said, at some point, the victim does morph into the aggressor. At some point, the threat is neutralized. After the threat's neutralized, you don't have license to chase down one of the people who attacked you and shoot at them simply because they had been attacking you earlier. That's going to be the factual challenge here. Can the state prove that's what happened? And can Brown prove self-defense, stand your ground, whatever it would be that would allow him to convince a judge and or a jury that he was justified if he did indeed take shots at one of the individuals allegedly trying to rob him. And who knows where this goes? He's still free. They haven't put his poster up at the post office with the most wanted. I know that's FBI, but I don't get the sense there's this overwhelming desire to bring him in and have him face justice. He's posting on social media some very erratic things, blaming the media for the situation, blaming the Miami Police Department for changing their mind about this. But, once they did their investigation, talked to the guy who was allegedly shot at, allegedly and possibly grazed in the neck by one of the bullets that were allegedly fired by Antonio Brown, they decided to proceed. But for now, Brown's free, and we'll see how it all plays out. And part of it as well, what kind of a client will Antonio Brown be? What kind of a witness will he be if he testifies? Usually criminal defendants don't get on the witness stand, but if he's going to tell a story of self-defense, he may be the best source of the evidence for that. And can he be controlled on a witness stand? Look, I don't know what his issues are objectively. For several years, you can make, I think, a not unfair conclusion that something's off. Something's off with Antonio Brown. And if he was like that early in his career, he did a good job of concealing it. It seems to have happened in the last 5 or 6 years. And whatever it is, it could complicate his effort to defend himself against these charges. Another question. TYZ, I-94, any update on which state the Chiefs will be picking for the next stadium? When is their deadline? Well, Kansas has applied a June 30 deadline for the Chiefs to take the package that Kansas has on the table for a new stadium, dome stadium for the Chiefs, possibly a Super Bowl in the future for Kansas City if they would go that route. Last week, Missouri finalized legislation that will pay for half of the renovations of Arrowhead, $1.15 billion. The state will pay for half of that. Now, it's going to be cheaper for the Chiefs to renovate Arrowhead because they're going to be kicking in roughly half of whatever this is going to be versus the new stadium, but you may make more money off the new stadium. All of these open air teams want dome stadiums now because they want to have events year round and they want to attract a Super Bowl and they want to have concerts and Final Fours. And there's only so many big events to go around. Like if somebody's doing a stadium tour in the fall and winter, how many of these dome stadiums are even going to make it onto the final list? I don't know. But these are all factors, business factors that drive where these decisions go. And for the Chiefs, it's very simple. They got to make a decision between Missouri and Kansas. And it's Missouri's fault because the voters rejected that sales tax continuation in April of 2024. Now the voters have the prerogative to do it. What should have happened was they should have come up with a way to get the politicians to make the money available without taking it to the voters, because we've learned time and again, if you take it to the voters are going to say no. No public money for these multi-billion-dollar businesses that can pay for their own stadiums. So it's now gotten to the point where the Chiefs have very real options. Kansas or Missouri, they're going to have to make a decision, presumably by the end of the month, but we'll see how firm that deadline is. If and when June 30 comes and goes, and if and when Kansas says, okay, fine, we're out, we're done, no Kansas option for the Kansas City Chiefs. Next, another one from our good friend A-Red Zona UK is Mike McDaniel on a hot seat for 2025. I believe the Dolphins coach is definitely on the hot seat. I don't know how you could argue he's not. Every year they say they're going to change the culture. At some point, you got to change the person in charge of the culture. And the challenge for the Dolphins this year, McDaniel's had that nice guy vibe all these years, 3 years so far as coach of the team. How do you abruptly change that? How do you become a hard ass after 3 years of being nice guy? And this is part of the reality, that pendulum that swings for teams. We had a Belichick-style hard ass in Brian Flores, and he was fired. We go to the other end of the spectrum. Nice guy, player-friendly, Mike McDaniel. Guy's late, guy's not listening, team not winning, team not tough enough. They move on from McDaniel, it's going to go in the other direction. Inevitably, it'll go in the other direction. And I think Tua Tagovailoa's future in Miami is hinging on Mike McDaniel's future in Miami. They're committed to Tua for 2 more seasons. They get through this season, they get a new coach. New coach is going to want a new quarterback. I guarantee you a new coach is going to want a new quarterback, because if they will have had a season bad enough to get McDaniel fired, the quarterback is too close to the failure, the chronic inability to get to the playoffs and win games that caused the coach to be fired. Tua will be out, traded, cut, whatever. New coach will want to move on, presumably, from Tua if McDaniel is out. So there's a lot of pressure on Tua. There's a lot of pressure on McDaniel. And I don't know how much better the Dolphins are really going to be. They can talk all they want about changing the culture. They're going to have to prove it 1 week at a time, starting in September. Dr. J144 with another question. Let's take a couple more here. I heard Peter King say before that Hall of Fame voters should basically ignore off-the-field stuff. I think human nature is inevitable, though. It will be hard for Justin Tucker and Antonio Brown, if found guilty, to ever make it right. Well, the bylaws prevent consideration of non-football issues. And the argument is, if we change the bylaws, it'll be unfair because plenty of guys have gotten in the past based upon off-field issues, most notably the guy whose slow speed Bronco chase happened 31 years ago yesterday, O.J. Simpson. I still think non-football factors trickle in to the voting. Terrell Owens, he was kept out for multiple years because enough of the voters didn't like him because he didn't kiss their asses. There have been players who have been kept out because the voters didn't like the personality. In fact, Ira Kaufman flipped that around and used that to get Warren Sapp in. He challenged the voters to not hold against Warren Sapp the fact that he can be a handful to deal with. And a lot of the voters probably had a story or two about an interaction with Warren Sapp that would have made them inclined to say, nah, he can wait a year or two, like Chris Carter had to do, like Terrell Owens had to do. It was a genius move by Ira to get Warren in. For the most part, just we don't like the guy is enough to keep him out. I think Antonio Brown's candidacy is going to be complicated. Who's going to stand up and make the case for Antonio Brown? Who's going to make a passionate case for Antonio Brown? First, someone has to do that, and then it has to work. We'll see if they can pull it off. And I guess Justin Tucker has potential Hall of Fame chops. It's hard to tell with kickers. But yeah, this incident that contributed to the Ravens releasing him, that's going to be a factor if and when the time comes for Tucker to be considered. Again, just a couple more. Ryan Nezet, assuming Roger Goodell is nearing retirement in the next 5 to 10 years, who are the potential candidates to succeed him as commissioner? He's 66. 3 years ago, he privately said there's no way he's going to be the commissioner when he's 80. I don't know. What else is he going to do? What other interests does he have? What other business could he get into? What from, I guess he'd go teach a class somewhere, something like that. But you've got a lot of money and you got a lot of power and relevance. And you're steering a ship that for the most part is in open blue water. Yeah, once every decade, there's a scandal, there's an issue, there's a challenge. But other than the Ray Rice thing from 2014, which I think there was probably a week and a half that Roger Goodell went to bed wondering whether or not when he wakes up, he's going to have to step down. It was bad, but that's the only time. So the money is flowing in. They're getting closer and closer to his goal of $25 billion in revenue per year by 2027. I don't know. Again, you got years left to live. What are you going to do with your life if you walk away? And will the owners push him unless and until they believe they have a viable alternative? And that's see, when you see the reports that in his next contract, the owners want to have a greater commitment to a succession plan, he's got them because they don't have an alternative. And I think at some point, they're just going to have to rip off the Band-Aid. I know the late Jim Irsay suggested this, and I've heard this from at least one owner. The next time they're hiring a commissioner in the NFL, it might be a situation where they have to go out and hire a traditional CEO, and you'll have a CEO of, Pepsi, and then jumps to a different, like FedEx, and jumps to like completely different lines of business. But the skill set of being an effective chief executive officer of a major business, that's transferable. That's what they may need to do. And then you have a chief football officer who's basically like the commissioner used to be. Or you could have the commissioner and a CEO who's above the commissioner, but it could blow up the whole model the next time they are hiring a commissioner. It could be that the commissioner is the number 2 to a CEO of the National Football League, especially when we consider that their businesses are expanding beyond just football. So the fact that there aren't any no-brainer candidates, you'll hear names like Condoleezza Rice. I don't think that'll happen. Kevin Warren, his name has come up in the past. They're going to want somebody in their 40s who's going to be around for another 15 or 20 years. You don't want to replace someone in his 70s with someone in their 60s. I think one of the reasons Brian Rolapp left, he's in his early 50s now. He has an opportunity to be the CEO of the PGA Tour. If he waits and waits and waits for Goodell to leave, he may be too old to be the commissioner by the time the NFL is looking for another one. So this is Game of Thrones stuff, and the king has 19 years under his belt. I don't think he'll be doing it for 19 more, but if you told me the over-under was 5, I'd probably take the over. Very important question. Well, a non-important question, not a football question. They're all important. Duncan has this question. Is there any possible benefit at all to a team in delaying paying the top players? And this is a continuing theme as it relates to Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, Aidan Hutchinson. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. I mentioned earlier that fourth year for a first-round contract, the bargain you get if you can kick the can through 4 years, that's one reason to wait. Because yes, the market will go up, but I think if you do a full analysis, whatever extra you pay over what you would have paid the year earlier, it still doesn't erase the huge benefit of having a guy like Aidan Hutchinson at $5.5 million this year, like Micah Parsons at $3 million last year, like Jamar Chase at $4.5 million last year. That's a reason to wait until the player has 4 years in, a first-round pick. Otherwise, the player continues to carry the injury risk. That's the reality. You make the guy play the fourth season, he's the one that's going to carry the injury risk, the risk of a serious injury. And the other side of it is, remember when Justin Jefferson missed, 5 or 6 games in 2023 with a hamstring problem? If you have any injury whatsoever and you've yet to get your contract, why are you playing? Why would you go out there? That's one of the realities. And, I'm 98%. Well, everybody's 98% or 95% or 90%. Well, everybody else has their security. I don't. I'm not playing unless I'm 100%. That's the downside to saying we're going to continue to keep the injury risk on the player. But the big thing for a first-round pick, if you can get through that fourth season, you've saved a lot of money. And it's not obvious, but to the people counting the beans, it is obvious. All right, this is the last question from Vamos for Ramos, the most important of the day. Any Ferrari updates, brand new or vintage? There was one in Pittsburgh that caught my eye. It's about 20 years old, low miles. And I finally convinced my wife that either I won't go to hell if I buy a Ferrari or she no longer cares if I do. That's the other thing. Like after we go, the vows are till death do us part. My wife may want nothing to do with me in the hereafter. And if I'm not there, if I'm in the other place, then she doesn't have to worry about me hanging around. So that hurdle has been cleared. And when I showed her the used one that's for sale near Pittsburgh, she said, well, wouldn't you just want to buy a new one if you buy one? It's like, whoa. But see, I think that the Jedi mind trick she's using is she knows at the end of the day, I am too cheap to do it. And that's going to be the challenge. And that's where I have to make the next mental leap. Will I actually do it? And I think I'm too cheap to do it because I am very cheap in some respects. You want to have a nice house to live in. You want to have a reasonably nice car to drive around. But there's a point where it's just too much. And the upkeep is going to be too much. So right now, that's what I'm wrestling with. So we've gotten past hurdle number 1, will you go to hell? Hurdle number 2, wife has given me the authorization. Hurdle number 3, am I too cheap to do it? So stay tuned. Stay tuned. There will or there won't be a brand new Ferrari when July 28 rolls around and PFT Live returns. Until then, PFT PM as many weekdays as we possibly can, right here, most of the time, answering your questions, keeping up to date. There's always something happening in the NFL, even when it's slow. We thank you for some of your time. Have a great day. We'll do this again on Thursday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.